before we get stuck into should we say what imposter syndrome is, just in case anyone,
Yeah.
I've got a bit of a definition that I listened to today because I thought I definitely suffer from it. Um, but I thought I should do some brush up my skills. So I just listened to a couple of podcasts that were talking about this. And I really like this definition. So imposter syndrome is feeling that you aren't good enough, that any success you've had is a stroke of luck. And basically any praise, people are, not, it's not really true. And that sooner or later you're going to be found out. Would you have anything to add, either of you?
That's pretty succinct for me. And that's kind of where, we can probably lend all of the roads that lead to imposter syndrome into one of those. I think. I don't know about you, Sophie. What do you think?
Look, I think it's a really good definition of it. I made a video a few months ago actually that I put on TikTok because got to come up with the content.
Yeah.
No, I'm kind of over that, and I just said I think imposter syndrome is a good thing. I think if you're feeling that, it means that you care about the project you're working on, and I'm also quite alert to how we tend to pathologize conditions. Like, oh, we have this thing, so it must be a bad thing. It's like, well, actually, maybe it's just a thing. Maybe imposter syndrome just exists as an entity, so it's something that you can notice and say, oh, okay, well, I think that I may not be good enough to do that. Why do I think that? Instead of actually going, oh, that's a terrible thing that I think that way. Because in some ways that's implying that you should be feeling amazing. You should feel like you're the best in the world at. It's like, well, should you feel that either? I don't know. So I go through phases mainly in the editorial process, not in the writing process, where I think, oh, I just can't do this. I'm not good enough. But I think it's par for the course. And I do think it's a normal, natural response, unless you're a sociopath, in which case you don't feel it. So that's the other part of it, is maybe only sociopaths don't feel it.
Yeah, maybe.
So, Amanda, do you want to say, what's it? What?
Yeah, I think
what your feelings are.
And Sophie, I know you asked me in relation to my writing, so maybe I'll focus in that space, given that's why we're here.
Yeah.
I think for me, I completely agree with sometimes we're so busy ready to box and label and pathologize emotion, reaction, and make it fit really nicely into something. And often it's such a conglomerate of so many things. I think for me, mine comes from having started the journey with my core writing crew, with Rach is one of, and we're all in a very similar space. And I feel like there's 5 of us and everyone else is launched into award winnings, major readerships, multi-published, traditionally published, super successful in my terms of success. And that's another thing that we can talk about, what is success actually. And so I think I went through quite a phase of, it took me ages to get my first book published. And then, of course, when it did get published, in my head, it was, and I'm going to say this and people are going to want to throw darts in my face probably, but I was like, oh, it's only digitally published and it's not really published.
My first book too. And I don't think it now because you've all, but I know what you mean.
No.
But we all, and I do think, I'll let you go in a second, but I think one of the things is that the time when you and I first got published digitally, so mine was a few years before yours, but it was still, did you say 2017?
17.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's face it. It was a lot
Eons
different
in publishing.
but also it was a lot different. And there was a lot more stigma than there is now. And so even if we didn't feel that, like, I feel like you almost were not ashamed, but you didn't want to be you sort of want to say, well, look, I know it's just this. I know, even though, and that's like, we're downplaying things that are a success because of what other people have said kind of beforehand. But whereas now, maybe. I think there's been a huge shift in the publication world and nobody frowns upon digital publishing or indie publishing. It's almost like that, it's actually better to be indie published, if you know what I mean. So I think I do think what's happening in the world really affects us. And also, as you said, imposter syndrome, I think there's so many levels to it, but comparison is really hard. I'm going to do a different take, but I understand where you're coming from, because growing up, when I've talked about this, I think probably in my first podcast, you know, when I had an eating disorder, was because I was comparing well, this is one of the things, but one of the reasons was I was comparing myself. I had 5 really close friends from school, there were 5 of us as well, and they were all like size 4 and 6, you know, kind of thing. And I was like 10 and thought that I was massively huge. So it's all like, yeah, it's so hard. We don't stay in our own lane, do we? We concentrate on what other people are doing and let that affect us. So I do understand the way you feel, but yeah.
Mm. So I think, you know, I had gorgeous people in our crew saying, but, you know, there's that quote that says something like, where you are now, you wished you were a year ago. And then, you know, 20,000 million people are wishing they were you are. And, you know, the imposter piece also kept berating myself going, who do you think you are? Like, oh my gosh, you've got a publishing contract with a traditional publisher and here you are whinging because it's not a book and I can't hold it. And, you know, and all that kind of thing. But yet, how many people would give their left arm for that? So, you know, I think there was guilt and drama in my own head, and I think I missed it in the moment, honestly.
Do you
That's
think
exhausting, what you've
Yeah,
just
yeah.
It
described.
is exhausting.
Do you think the imposter syndrome, because I get where you're saying, Sophie, that imposter syndrome can be a good thing because it keeps us, you know, what's the word? Not it keeps us
Invested. I think I'll
I
come to
think
that one too, but
keeps us invested, keeps us wanting to do better. So it doesn't make us, we don't rest on our laurels in a way. And, you know, you don't become this horrible person who's walking around, you know, with a head that's too big to get through the door because you think, you know, you're just, so there's definitely positives, I guess, for it. But the problem I see is when imposter syndrome becomes so, it's like, I feel like doubt and imposter syndrome are, you know, the same kind of thing. They're related anyway, because there can be other doubts, but imposter syndrome is a type of doubt, if you know what I mean. Like I feel it's doubting you're good enough to do what you want to do, right? And so I think the problem with imposter syndrome is when it becomes too loud and it actually stops you following dreams or, you know, trying to write, or because, as I said, I had really bad doubt a few years ago and it was so much in my head that it was very hard to actually get past that and do anything. And, you know, it's depressing as well because you don't constantly want to be going around thinking I suck, you know, like it's not a good mental space kind of to be in. So I think that's where you need to manage, like, that's where it's the bad side of imposter syndrome, you know. It needs to be a balance, and if it leans one way, it's dangerous for different reasons.
Yeah, and I guess, look, my approach to it does come directly out of my long years practicing yoga, practicing meditation, which is that just the practice in stepping aside from the experience and saying, okay, I'm a witness to my own thoughts here. Why am I having these? So that's a technique that I've developed. But Amanda, while you were talking, I was just writing down we were talking about success. You were feeling like you hadn't had success, and that's related to what your goals are. And of course, the goals might be things that you've inherited from other people and reading things online thinking, oh, well, that's what success looks like because that's what I'm told the goals should be, as opposed to goals that are authentically yours. And by that, I mean goals that are kind of springing up from within you, and the goal might have originally been when you started writing that you wanted to finish the manuscript, or the goal might have been you wanted to write a great story, or the goal may then become I want to connect with readers, or I want to honor the story, and then it turns into more material goals like the print, the ebook. So the goals start to shift, and that can also be exhausting and also be hard to keep track of because then they're continually elusive. It's like it's one more step away from you. So when you started writing, the book that was published, what was your initial goal when you set out on that manuscript?
Really good question. And the original goal was to finish the manuscript, and the next goal was to impact my readers, to, you know, have people read a story that stayed with them for a few days, characters that they thought about for a little bit longer than when they shut the end page, and also really to resonate with people who had experienced some of those things, you know. And I think they've always been the goal. I mean, why do we write? Right. Rachael spoke, you spoke, Rach, when I met Sophie, about if you give up, if you don't want to write, give up. And I have done that a couple of times. Like, yep, I'm just not going to. I'm not going to write anymore. It's too hard, and I hate myself. It's not working, and then I can't not write. It just, it comes back in. So I think
who you
for
are
me,
in the end.
yeah. I think, Sophie, it's an excellent question. And the goal for me has always been, why do you write? Do you write for fame, glory? Do you, what is it that you write for? For me, the goal has always been to impact the people who are reading it. And, why do I want to do that? Because words and song and experiences that I have had that are my connectors back to myself in moments of joy, of sorrow, of all of the things, involve words in some way, and I think they're cathartic, they change lives. I've often spoken about, do not underestimate what a few words will do for somebody, and I absolutely believe it. So the goalpost did shift though. Then I was like, okay, so wait a minute, I finished this book. Oh my gosh, it's not very good. But anyway, I'll submit it because I gave myself a timeline and, I had to do that. And then, oh wait, oh my gosh, I got asked for it to be sent back. And, and oh my gosh, it's now published. Oh my gosh. And I actually remember thinking it was almost, this is again, people probably want to stab me, but I was a little bit anticlimactic. I was kind of like, oh, I did it. Oh, wow. And what happens now? But wait,
I think a lot of people feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even
for me, it was like, it's not a book. It's a digital, it's not a book, it's utterly ridiculous, right? But at the time,
it was a book. It was just a book in a different format.
It is a book. Everyone listens in different, well, we all read and experience books in different ways too. And, it's definitely is a book. I'm just trying to unpack this in that almost your imposter syndrome, like was for that particular book, like as well, you know what I mean? Like you've got it now, which is maybe stopping you, like it's slowing down your writing, I'm thinking, like because you've got all this stuff in your head that's stopping you. But it's like it stems back to thinking that, it's
that was
published,
less than, which is ridiculous. Yeah.
So Amanda, my question for you is, have you had feedback from readers that it has had an impact on them the way you were hoping?
Yes. Yeah.
So
and
therefore, are you not a success?
Yes. So look, funnily, with the gift of hindsight, I actually look at all of that now and go, I was so fortunate, actually. And because my book did get into hands of readers, it actually was a non-popular genre. It was difficult to pitch, it was difficult to market and all the things like that, but I still got readers, I still got feedback. Yeah, and people sent messages commenting on the pieces that changed their world. And I felt good then.
Do you still have those emails?
Yeah. So I've kept those.
Do you read them? Like
I do. It's actually funny you say that. Recently, I pulled that out. I'm like, that's right. That's why I do this.
I was going to say that's what you need to hold on to in those moments of doubt and those moments thinking I'm not good enough. And I know that we're talking about imposter syndrome here too, but I think it ties into Amanda has a full-time job, 3 kids, and finding the time to write is hard. It's and that you beat yourself up sometimes that, you're not like necessarily doing what you should be doing, but you were doing the best you can. And I think it's also, I know also though you find I'm putting words into your mouth, but tell me if I'm not, like, because I understand from when my kids were little, our kids are about the same age, but I'm whatever, I don't have another job. So, I don't have that having to find the time to write or find the, but I think also, now I've forgotten what I was going to say. I was saying kids are little and stuff. Oh, it's not just beating yourself up for not time, right? It's actually, you need that time to write for your own sort of fulfillment and happiness and stuff. And then it can get, it's like a sort of, I can't think of the word because I was always like late night, I don't know the words. But it's almost like it's a spinning, it's like a circle. What do I mean? Keep going around.
A vicious cycle,
vicious cycle. Thank you. Because it's like if you don't get the time to write, you're upset about it because you need that time to write. But then when you do get the time to write, the other sort of head, like all that stuff's in your head. So it's kind of like breaking out of
Well,
that.
yeah. I think part of it is when I have the time to write, I suddenly feel this other kind of pressure because now I have this dedicated, allocated time. So I must produce and I must, and don't waste it.
Got to be good enough. Do you know, I was thinking today, and that's the thing, I think with first draft, and we have talked about this, I think already, I don't know, the order will come out, but I'm doing editing at the moment. And I was just looking like on my big screen at how, as I said to Sophie before you came on, that these are light edits, right? Light structural edit. But I was looking at my manuscript kind of on the screen and the amount of red that is in there, all these, like, I was like, the first chapter is pretty much completely changed to how it was when I, actually wrote it. And what it made me think about today is how much we don't have to get it right first time. When you sit down to write, that pressure of, I've got this time now, so I need to make it good. I need to make it work. If you can somehow lift that pressure off and remember that, yeah, it's just about getting the words down. I don't know. I just say I've got this thing on my wall because I don't know what time I put it on here. It's called my writer's manifesto. I don't know if I saw someone say something about doing this. And Sophie, you might like this because it is good, positive self-talk. But I would say what I went through was probably more doubt, but and burnout than imposter syndrome. But it was all kind of like, I do have that imposter syndrome, but it got to the point where the doubt, I don't know. So I went through a stage where the voice in my head was so strong that I felt physically ill when I was going to write, that I couldn't do it. And I thought that my career was pretty much over. And I wrote this, and it's like, my writer's manifesto is, I will write when I don't feel like it. I will write when it hurts. I believe I can write even if I feel like it sucks. People want to read what I write, and that's why I asked you about, have you still got those letters? I know because they email me and write good reviews. We don't worry about the bad reviews. Books I thought sucked while I was writing have gone on to be bestsellers and get great response from readers. It's okay if the words aren't brilliant and riveting. If I just get something down, I can make it better. And the final one in bold says, I will not stop writing. And I just think that, having something for you as well that you can look at and sort of own manifesto might help. I'm not a life coach or a therapist like Sophie, but
I think Sophie, your point to the self-talk and the checking the why. I think my why of doubt, or if you want to talk about imposter syndrome, I have a pretty full-on day job, and sometimes I'm really confident in that, and sometimes I feel exactly like that in this, and then sometimes it'll flip around into the writing, and I remind myself that I'm a competent human. I can do the things, and why? What is it? And it's often external elements that are also, from an energy point of view or whatever it is. It just depends where you're at in that moment, I think. And there's, as Rach and you and I have talked about this lots, there's a lot of factors that might come together in one moment that feel like it's imposter syndrome, but actually you just died,
it's so true.
Yeah.
I think in an earlier podcast too, we said, we're talking about writer's block when someone asked a question. And I said, some of it is just life. Like sometimes there's just too much going on in your mental brain, like, in your life, there's too much other stress than actually being creative. And I remember at a conference years and years ago, somebody said something like, if you can, and of course none of us can necessarily do this because we're all paying bills and mortgages and school fees and all that kind of stuff, but that the job that you do during the day, it's better if it's not like brain creative.
I remember that.
Yeah, it was like, if you can be, do something, I'm not going to say any particular job because I don't want to offend anyone, but do something that really doesn't require much mental energy, because then you'll still have the energy when you get home to do it. Whereas if you are, doing something that uses your creative brain at work as well, and not necessarily like painting or that, but just problem solving, that's using your creative brain, right? Then it's hard. So I guess I feel like the problem is imposter syndrome is one part of it, but the other part of it is that, life gets in the way sometimes. And that's really hard when you want to write, but for whatever reason you can't. And that can be really hard, like disheartening. And yeah.
I will also say, related to this, that I think self-doubt is the path of least resistance. It is far easier to sit there and go, I suck,
So
I can't do
true.
this. It takes much less energy to do that than it does to sit there and say, I can do this and I'm going to do it, because that requires propulsive motion, right? That's like, I have to
Absolutely.
take action. Whereas
It's
sitting there
true.
and going, oh no, I suck. It's like, well, that's passive.
Also, do you feel like sometimes it's almost failing, like saying you're going to fail before you actually do it? It's like, well, I didn't try to do it, so I knew I
You're
couldn't.
managing your own
You
expectations.
know what I
right?
mean? Like, it's like, oh, you can't say I failed, or you can't say I didn't succeed because I didn't actually do it at all. You know, like I didn't try. I know I'm not good enough. So don't.
Because it actually,
Yeah.
you have to be audacious, I think, to do what we do, what everyone does, putting creative work into the world, because you have to be prepared to put it out there and take the chance that someone's not going to like it. And you either have to accept the dislike and, you know, face it and accept it, or just construct the fortress. It's like, I know it's out there. I know the spears are heading this way, but I'm just going to stay in the fortress and keep the bricks up to a certain level so I can stay in here and keep writing. And again, that takes work and energy. And if you do have a life that has many other things in it, it takes more work. I do personally think it's a practice of regular tending. And when you can get into that practice, it's less work than starting from nothing, if that makes sense. Like, it's the whole thing of like, it's easier to stay fit than to get fit in the first place. Yeah.
And, you know, the other thing I will say, I'm thinking about your fortress and the bricks. What I have more recently thought about with this stuff, and actually ever since we spoke about this and potentially talking about it, is really examining from the way back when of childhood or teenagehood or early 20s or whatever it is, where you were either told or you gave yourself a narrative about who you are and how you behave and what you do. And I think, you know, as approaching mid-century as I am, I'm like, you know what? Probably time to question some of those core beliefs and how they got there. And, you know, and I think, you know, I've been constantly told you're an A type and you're a this and you're a that and you're a this and you're a that, and that equals this. And, you know, nah, that's probably not quite true. And I don't need to subscribe to that. And my fortress can be different, you know, like, so I think instead of passively behaving in a way that I
question who those beliefs served.
Absolutely.
Who benefited from you
being,
so who benefits from us being good girls? Who benefits from us showing up and doing all the stuff, right? Like, there are other people who benefit a great deal from that.
100%. So I think, you know, I think you reach a point, and this reflects back for people who write, and you find that a lot of people who have come to writing a little bit older, it's not true for everyone, but people who've had some perspective and been able to do a bit of self-work and a little bit of reflection on their why and how they got here and what it is, can answer those and sometimes push through differently what we might call the imposter syndrome of, oh, I'm not good enough. And if I did that and I got that, then that was just a fluke. You know, I did have that. You know, I got the one book published and it's been 100,000 years since then. And there's never going to be another one. And, you know, and obviously, and that was probably pretty average anyway. And I only just got it because, and ridiculous.
Yeah, your
right?
imposter syndrome's good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really well honed.
It's well honed.
Yeah.
And it's a daily argument in my mind. So Rachel has to listen to this on occasion. So
but you know what? I totally understand. And that sounds really weird. And I often feel a bit strange saying that to people, because they're like, well, look at your, you know, books that you've got.
But it's relative.
Blah, blah,
it's all
blah.
relative.
And what was really interesting, I think, is that if you talk to, like, we all have to deal with it. And so one of the things is to know that just because you get another book published and another one, which you will, I have faith, right? It's not necessarily going to make that go away. And so these techniques, I suppose, that Sophie's saying are ways to look at it. Like, it's beneficial to everyone, because it doesn't just disappear no matter what success, as we said, whatever success is, no matter what success you have, it doesn't disappear. In fact, I think it can get worse sometimes. That sounds horrible, because
more pressure.
You've got more pressure, but also, like, you've got further to fall. You think you've got, I'm like, look at these books, like, it's amazing that anyone liked any of them. Like I just think surely eventually someone's going to realize that that I actually can't do this. I haven't sold overseas very well at all, really. Like I haven't had a movie deal.
That's it. You suck. Let's finish this
it's easy enough
podcast.
to say, well, it's easy enough to go, it's obviously my books why I haven't sold overseas. It's because I'm not as good as, say, Leah Moriarty or like Sally Thorne. I'm trying to just think I'm not as good as other people, so that's why I haven't sold overseas, right? And then I'm like, well, why am I even trying? Are people laughing at me because I'm just so, you know what I mean? Like, so it doesn't go away, and so I think is something, that we need to just kind of, as you said, Sophie, it's something that's there. It's not necessarily what did you say, a bad thing?
Not necessarily a bad thing. Yeah. I mean,
It just is. Yeah.
The mere fact I'm talking to you on video is an example of how I got past an imposter syndrome, just to use an example. So I started doing video interviews for my country music life on Sunburnt Country Music. I started doing it even though I loathed being on camera, I even loathed having photos taken, because I realized that was the best way to help the musicians that at that time had no work. Like there were gigs had stopped, and I was talking to a publicist I know well. I just said, I'm trying to work out how to help these musicians. I think I should do video interviews. I think I should do audio interviews. And then she offered to put one of the artists on Zoom. And I thought, well, maybe I should do these on video, and that would require me learning the skills, how to edit, all that kind of stuff. And I didn't want to be on video. I thought, who's going to want to watch me on video? Like, I can't do this. Terrible, blah, 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 blah. And then I just thought, well, the mission is what matters. And to quote Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 7, that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 7.
Mission is what matters.
The mission is what matters. And so I just
true.
thought, yeah.
And then you did it, and look at you now. And here's the thing, like, I think similarly, part of my imposter syndrome came from, okay, so I published a book and I'm hanging out with all these really well-published people. I'm hanging around with, particularly at the time, RWA, and I'm just assuming that rocks up every year with nothing. And yet I was on panels and I was delivering workshops and things like that because I had other skills, but still I was like, oh, that's just because I'm the loser no writer. And that's ridiculous, because what was the goal of those? To help other people achieve. What do I do for a job? What am I qualified in? Oh, wait. Changing people's lives, helping them discover it for themselves. What a fraud. Oh God, why can't I do it myself? So I think to your point there, Sophie, when you pivot, you have like circumstances say, all right, what skills have you got? What can you do with them? And what are you going to do with them? And how are you going to push through that? So, I mean, Rachel will probably tell you, every single time I've gotten up to stand up to moderate or do something, I fight constantly with people are going to go, why are you doing that with your little one book wonder?
And I'm like, because you're really good at what you do, and you're professional.
And also, Amanda, who cares what they think?
That's 100%. And again,
they too.
Who wants to be a pleaser, for God's sake?
Also, you're talking about the good girls and stuff, and you're talking about as you approach, the 50. I think that's the thing too. Like, really, who cares? And if they are, and I've definitely got, I think that does help with the imposter syndrome a bit, in terms of, because there's two parts of it. I think there's your own part, like your own doubt and stuff, but there's also other people will look at me and think, who are you to teach this, or who are you to do that? You haven't done this or whatever. One, I'm pretty sure most people aren't actually thinking that, because
100%.
Everyone's worried about their own imposter syndrome, so they're not looking at you and going, why are you doing that, when you don't have a, nobody cares that much about anybody else.
100%.
So they're not actually or the same if it's a handful of people, maybe let's give it that's have, think your books suck, Rachel, and what are you doing? And Amanda, you've only had one, you shouldn't be there. And Sophie, who do you think you are to be this person? And then now changing to this, maybe there's 5 people that think those things, but then there's so many more people that can see, the good.
That you impact for good.
Yeah. And they're the people that matter, really.
And partly why I say who cares what they think is because you're never going to know. And so much time and energy worrying about that, but you're never going to know what anyone really thinks, because even if you ask them a direct question about what they think, they could lie to you.
So there's lots of points, and it really doesn't matter, because
there's that great quote that says, what other people think about you is none of your business. And I use it often. for everybody else in my life.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
not myself.
yeah. I know isn't that so true that we can always, tell everyone else Sophie is telling me off for how I speak to my own, creativity, my own back, and all the things that I would never say to anybody
The
else.
adjectives are all in one direction, Rach. I'm not loving the trend. Got to
Mm.
tell you, it's terrible, bad, worse. These are the things that have come up. So Amanda, I think what we're getting to here as a point of resolution around this imposter syndrome,
Yes, we have a
is
resolution.
to change your interpretation of what's going on and change your self-talk. Much as I've been bossing Rachael about this, it's because you do it for other people. This is the work you do for other people, is to put them in a positive frame for what they're doing. And partly I wonder whether it's in the context of your own work, you've run out of path to do it for yourself. You're so good at supporting other people that there's not much left for you.
100%. Yeah, the tank is empty.
You're supporting your, colleagues, employees, you're supporting your kids and your husband, and it's true. And I think often doubt, as I said, is a symptom for something else.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, the hardest part too, I think, and if we're going to label the thing about imposter syndrome or any of these labels too, I actually am really working hard now. It's funny, since we've been talking about it and we were going to have this chat, why do we have this need to put things in boxes and make a label and then live to it, and that's a whole other story, right? But I think I forgot what I was going to say. Oh my gosh.
But it is, look at the time we're speaking, it's almost 10 o'clock at night on the East Coast where you and I, so you forgive me for forgetting.
That's all good. But, I think just the tank, when the tank is empty, just notice and then do what you can. I think, we have a colleague, Rebecca Heath, and she has a strategy of just one word until you have 10 words. And if you only get 10 words, you get 10 words. And some days, honestly, no one ever only writes 10 words once they start that. You at least do a sentence.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, it's just a reminder that something is better than nothing. And then if there's that's the thing in all realms, all the things. So yeah.
Maybe talk to the imposter syndrome. I'm just thinking as sort of say, so what? So what if I am not good at this? I know this is a different way, Sophie, just bear with me. I'm trying to, but so what if I write a book and it doesn't do well? I've written a book, I've had fun, I've finished a project. How many people can actually say they've ever done that? So what if it's not as good as so-and-so's book and somebody doesn't like it? Somebody else will. So I think, just challenging those thoughts and going back to say, I don't care what you think, what you're telling me about myself.
It's back to the goals. It's back to the goal. What's your goal? What's your goal?
And also sitting there going, oh, that's partly what I was talking about with the detachment of it, is when you have those thoughts come in, instead of attaching to them and then kind of watering them like a plant, step back and go, oh, that's interesting. Why am I thinking that right now?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, there is usually something else going on. And I think, it comes back to, again, all these things are related in terms of doubt, imposter syndrome, burnout, writer's block, right? And I think all of them, there's usually something going on that's deeper. So when I had a big panic a couple of weeks ago, I don't think we've aired that podcast yet. I was just I can't do this. There's no tension in my book. I just had a day where I was really, and I think the more you do it, the more you know that you go through these things as well and you can get past them. But the reason was because there was something wrong, not with me and my overall process and my overall writing. It was just, there was a specific wrong with that scene, but then it's sort of the feelings and the thoughts become overwhelming and you don't see it clearly. So I think that whole stepping back and going, why am I feeling this? Whether it's on a scene level, whether it's on a life level, is really good. And then you can sort of address the actual issue.
Yeah. And I think for anybody listening, you have such a lovely little crew of listeners. I think I've seen a couple of your reviews and things, and people who are writers or would like to be writers or down the track of their writing career, and they're listening and they can kind of resonate with some of this. I think the other gift of listening to people like us talk, or being in a group of writers or people in the industry who say, I know, and maybe you could try this step. And I remember thinking, oh my God, you get so much advice and so many people talk about how they do things differently. But if you can just look at it as, okay, well, you know what? This is just normal, and this could be a good strategy for me, and listen out for the language of, for example, Sophie, you talking about noticing that thought drop in and go, what's happened there? I have one of my children suffers, manages pretty serious anxiety. And we spent a good amount of time talking about just noticing, yeah, you're here. Here you are. Go away.
Almost like, is that like almost making it like a person? I was thinking,
Yeah.
you read
And
Jane Tara's latest book, Tilda is Visible.
Mm-hmm.
She calls it, I can't remember, Pearl, the internal thoughts. Like she's an acronym, so but it almost label it, give the anxiety a name, give the imposter syndrome a name, like make it like just someone in your life you've got to deal with.
Yeah, and I think if you personify it a little bit, then it asks you question. You ask yourself like the questions you're saying, Sophie, where you're like, okay, well, why are you here right now? What are you serving in me? Is it good or bad? Is it positive or negative for me right now? And if I need to pay attention to it, okay, I will. And so for people traveling the path, as we all will, up and down and all around, I think just listening and figuring out, okay, well, everyone goes through it. We don't have to label it. It doesn't have to be a sign of a bigger problem, or it could be, but then just really sitting in the moment and noticing and then questioning rather than being consumed by it. I think, those days when the anxiety goes up and you can't think, you can't get a sentence in Rach for you couldn't see what was wrong with the scene because it became bigger than us, you know?
Yes.
Don't indulge it.
Does that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's the path of least resistance to indulge it, because it can feel like this warm bath of stuff that you recognize, self-doubt and
as you said, it's safe. Yeah, it's kind of safe. But like
comfort in the discomfort.
For your imposter syndrome, it's stopping you actually use the time you do have probably productively, because instead of if you've got an hour to write, you might spend half of that going, why am I even doing this? This is stupid. Like,
on occasion, it's ridiculous. And I'm like, okay, you just spent all that time worrying, or I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's too much information and not enough information, and it's exhausting. It's exhausting living inside my head.
That is exhausting, but also just to reframe the time, because thinking time is just as valuable as time putting words on the page.
That's true. I just meant negative thinking. Like, I do agree with that. Thinking is really important, and sometimes thinking about your book and where you're going is good. But if you're sitting there for half an hour going, I suck, this is stupid, why am I even bothering doing this? Then that's not necessarily productive. That's not productive thinking time.
No, that's not productive thinking. That's the warm bath of self-doubt.
Yeah, I don't think I do that. But the thinking is doing, I remember hearing that somewhere, probably an RWA thing, Rach, it might have been. But that was a bit like the biggest gift ever, because thinking is doing, and you need that time to percolate and ponder. And, I think that's a really big gift for anyone who worries that they're not productive because the words aren't going down. The thinking time allows you to be probably significantly more productive because you've pondered it for a bit. Yeah,
definitely. I've worked that out. I've said it before. Like, I used to aim for 2,000 words a day, and I still do if I'm, in a reasonable place and it's going well. If I don't beat myself up now if I have to have a day where I don't really do anything, because I usually know that happens. Like a couple of weeks ago when I had that day where I was just not feeling it kind of thing, and the next day I had to think more than do anything. But then the following day I got back on track and I actually made my word count for the week in the end. But I needed to pause, and so that thinking time is really important. And I don't think we put enough, like, we just look on what's the outcome rather than like physical.
Productivity rhetoric is everywhere, right? Like every workplace, every piece of software now, Microsoft Office, it's all productivity tips. Use this to be more productive, which is a very particular way of looking at the world, which is a very recent way of looking at the world and at work, and creative work in particular. This whole idea that you have to get out, and obviously when you're on a deadline, Rach, you do need to write a certain number of words. But the whole idea of having to be productive as a way of doing it can be counterproductive, in that it can tie you up in knots, because you're thinking, in order to be productive on this manuscript, I have to do this many words. And if I don't make that many words, then I haven't been productive. So there's the layer of guilt, of self-doubt, of self-admonishment, which is like, I haven't met those goals. If we actually think, well, productivity is just this notion that sits out here that's been imposed on us by Bill Gates and his own, and everyone at Microsoft.
Yeah.
And instead think I'm creating a story. It's going to take what it will take. I have a date that I need to get that story in. I'm just going to head for that date and see what happens and not count my words and not label it as productivity or non-productivity or whatever it is. Then what happens and how do we free ourselves from those expectations? And how does the job actually become more flowing, more enjoyable, more playful, more interesting to us? Because that's the other part of it, is that when you've locked into that productivity mindset, things just aren't that interesting and they're not that, there's no light to them at all.
Well, you stop being present. You just really stop being present in the gift of what you're doing because you're panicking about, well, I use it, even the language. Sophie would not use the word panic.
It is panic.
But, you're pushing for this end game rather than immersing in the now with boundaries, but,
Yeah, saying that, like, do you have a particular, like when you sit down to write, say, do you have particular times that you write? And do you have a word count? Like, what do you try to do?
I don't have a particular time anymore. I used to be really good at night, but that just does not work for my brain anymore. I just can't seem to make it go the distance. I usually aim for a word count, and it just depends on kind of, what that looks like for the week. If I know I've got 3 lots of time in the week, then I'll adjust the word count for that. But also, it's funny, in saying all of this, I usually map out some scenes, and if I don't get the word count, at least I need to be able to get through the scenes. And that might include the thinking time. So I do that. I also know about myself. Once I have mapped out, I'm a little bit like this. I explain it like, if I can get the corners of the jigsaw puzzle, I can work out the rest.
Yeah.
If I don't have the corners, I faff around and write myself into a corner or research for 5 hours down the rabbit hole. So my process is get my corners for the time frame I have and fill in the blanks, kind of.
So I was just wondering, I love that jigsaw analogy too, by the way. But I was wondering because, Sophie said to me last week, I'm thinking about my deadline, and so I work out how many words a day or week I have to do. But I loved it sort of being a little bit more, I don't know the word, but just saying it needs to be done by the end of June. It will be done somehow.
Yes, you can manipulate time. That's the conversation.
I love that. So I'm just
That's a good one.
Maybe, instead of those sort of word count goals, which may put pressure on you as well, that maybe you sort of say, I want to write a book by Christmas or whatever, and somehow it will be done. I don't know.
Because in a parallel dimension of time, it has been done.
Yes, this is the thing. And, I think for
That's
me,
spitting my mind out. I can't.
I know at this time of the night, but we should do that another time. But yeah, I think for me, I have to have a little bit more structure around the how I'm going to get there, because
and that's great because you know that about yourself, obviously.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I can say I want this deadline. The interesting thing for me is, I have proven to myself time and again that under requirement, when someone says, hey, there's this competition and you should just hone those skills, and I'm like, no, I can't write that genre. I don't want to do that genre. Or I might wait. I need to flex my creative muscles. Wait, you need to pull out 5,000 words in an actual story in a week and a half. And I can. So that is just testament to don't be a bleep, you can. It's just, what are you doing? Why aren't you making yourself do that? Because I don't know.
But I do know it's very hard, because having been in that period of doubt, part of me was saying to myself, look, you've done it before. You've written this many words in this month. Like, just write it. Just do it. It doesn't matter if it's crap, just do it. But I couldn't.
Not that simple. Yeah.
It's not. So we do have to be kind to ourselves. I think that's the biggest thing in terms of, even though I keep saying bad words, Sophie, I do think
you've come a very long way, Rach, though.
I have. And in the last few years, like having gone through real bad burnout, doubt, imposter syndrome, whatever we're going to call, I think it was a mixture of kind of all 3. And I still suffer all of them on a daily basis. But I do exactly what Sophie said now, most of the time, is that I recognize it and I don't let it spiral. And I also am kinder to myself and have taken the pressure. I've still got pressure on myself from deadlines and obviously wanting to, do an okay job and stuff.
Mm.
But I've really, hard to explain, but I have taken a lot of pressure off myself because I've given myself permission to go, look, if it doesn't get done, or I'd rather it not get done in time than it be not something I'm happy with, kind of thing. So be kind to yourself. That's what I'm sort of saying to myself a lot. Be kind. Don't put pressure on yourself, because I feel like, to me, putting the pressure on myself is only going to make me have a crap life, make me feel anxious and, you know, upset all the time and physically feel sick, but it's also not going to give me my best results, I feel. So I do think we've got to be kind. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Sophie, what's your process? So what, you know, we talk about consistency and building the habit and just sitting in the chair and, you know, it's harder to start than keep going. What are your go-to strategies for pushing past the days where it's harder than others?
Well, so I think I've talked in a previous episode about Gretchen Rubin's 4 tendencies framework. And I encourage everyone to take her test and find out which tendency you are, because I'm an upholder and we are the just do it tendency. So I actually don't often have those moments of pushing through because I'm the just do it tendency, which is like, well, I don't feel like it, well, I have to do it. And it's not that I'm actually reminding myself that I'm an upholder. That's actually just how I think. It's like, well, I don't feel like it. Well, it has to get done. So you're just going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's pretty much what it is. But, you know, if I'm a different tendency.
Few other writers that we know that write quite a few books, Amanda, who I think would be that type of person. And I'm just not that type of person, I can say. Yeah.
And that's why it's important to understand that, because of what you're talking about with the, you know, beating yourself up about things. If you're a obliger tendency, and you need someone else to hold you accountable, then all you need is to actually identify an accountability partner and say, would you mind checking in with me whatever days of the week you nominate, to see how I'm going, and just and ask me how many words I've written, if that's what you want the target to be, because then it takes the pressure off you to have to do that for yourself. And so I'm saying to you, Amanda, if you find out what tendency you are and it's obliger, then partly what might take the pressure off you is actually finding an accountability partner who can say, hey, Amanda, how many words have you written this week?
And I do have one of those, so that works. I kind of sit between those two tendencies. And you know what? I have actually looked at that before and I totally forgotten about it. So I have to go back and revisit, Gretchen.
I need to have a look.
Yeah.
Gretchen would say you're not between two tendencies, you're one or the other. You can be one with some shades of another, but you can't share them. Yes. Yeah. So you can be obliger with a side of questioner or
whatever.
Yeah. But you're mainly one tendency. And I do go on about her work a lot because I think it's really important for anyone engaged in any kind of creative practice or anything that involves trying to put expectations on themselves more than externally applied expectations, so that they can understand why they might be frustrating themselves in terms of projects. So look, the flip side of the upholder tendency is that we're really rigid. It's like, it's just like, oh no, that has to get done. No, I can't change that. And we're really not great at spontaneity. So if someone wants to change plans, it's like, no, I don't think I can do that. It's not even
we will note that.
It's just I can't do that. And no, I will be flexible about things, but the automatic response is no, I can't do that.
No, it's not my thing.
Yeah, that's right. It's like I haven't. It's not written in the diary.
I'm going to investigate to find out what tendency I am.
Yeah, so there's a quiz. You do the quiz. It won't take very long, and answer honestly, because some people will. So Gretchen's talked in the past about how a lot of obligers have said to her, how do I become an upholder? And she's like, you can't.
You just can't. You just can't.
That's the best.
And, you know, it's always funny with any kind of tool that deciphers personality or behavioral traits or tendencies or whatever. People are like, oh, my God, that was so me. It's like, yeah, you answered it.
Yes.
But also the other part is, when you're trying to answer honestly, is it your thought or the one you think you should have or the one people tell you are?
Yeah.
So spend some time doing that too. Yeah.
I think the good thing about the 4 tendencies quiz is that the 4 tendencies framework is it's not like a Myers-Briggs, so it's not
it's not so huge
framework.
I'm up here ready to go.
I did a Bachelor of Laws, and I remember being told during that some university in the United States had tested the students at the start of the degree, and they were all different types of Myers-Briggs framework, whatever. And then at the end of the degree, they were all the same. And they couldn't work out whether it was because they genuinely changed their personalities or whether they were answering the questions in a way that they thought they should, so that they all turned out to have the same combination.
How interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
We
What
have
does that
talked
say about the entire process with which they sat it? You know, like what was what were they getting the outcome for? You know, and who was seeing it? Interesting. But
yeah, we've talked for quite a long time. We're probably boring people to tears now. We should probably
we're veering to what, well, because Amanda is a life coach, so
it's very interesting.
related
I feel like I should have just sat back and let you two talk, because you guys know a lot. Here we go. I'm imposter syndrome.
There you go. Yeah. Hello. Well, so look, Rach, that was a beautiful way to tie it back into the subject at hand. You know, you just brought it all home there. But also, I think the personality stuff is part of it, right? Like I wouldn't mind betting that obligers have more of a tendency towards imposter syndrome, because they're sitting there going, I can't make myself do this. I need someone else to help me. Therefore, I'm a failure. This is also very much related to
all of it,
all the productivity stuff, you know, and we're talking about, again, of feeling like you're failing, not being productive enough. This is a cultural framework we live in. It's not the only one that exists in the world. So we think it's the way work is, but it's actually come out of a Protestant work ethic, which is punitive in nature.
Yes, and that's a whole other podcast day. But I think, you know, it's just I've recently been unpacking a lot of this because of lots of things, but how did we get here, and what is it actually serving? And that's it, you know. And the same as, like, you must have hustle. Everyone's got to hustle. Why can't we be peaceful? Why can't we be in the moment? Why do you have to have hustle? Why do you have to have something on the side? Why do we have to have 5 things going? Well, we won't be able to achieve, or, you know, do. It's the same thing. It's about the maximizing noise. You know? And growth isn't always best, you know.
It's about doing, not being. And so if we were going even further into a discussion, doing is a masculine paradigm, being is a feminine paradigm. We're not going down that particular path, because
not today. But we did talk about this actually that night. I talked about doing a whole thing on be, do, have, rather than have, do, be. So yes, completely agree.
I think you two should start a podcast just about this sort of stuff, not about writing. All these other things.
If people, you know, it's
how many podcasts can you have, Sophie?
I think I have enough at the moment, but look, we'll put a pin in that idea, Amanda.
Yes. High achieving Sophie. I don't know. I don't actually know when you sleep, but anyway, I'm sure at some point.
I do absolutely sleep. Sleep is fantastic and absolutely necessary, but everyone's got their own sleep patterns. Let's put it that way. But yes, we have had you talking for a while, and it is, if I'm putting on my glasses to read the time on my computer, it is 10:35 p.m. on the night we're talking. So Amanda and I probably do need to go to sleep. Rach, it's 3 hours behind where you are, but you may have a night that you may wish to do things in as well.
Got a few more admin jobs I have to do before I'm allowed to crawl into bed with my book.
Well, I'm super grateful for both of you having me come and chat about all the things, just from a little comment here and there. And I hope people, you know, you've been so insightful with each of the episodes so far. And I think it's just a gift out there of just allowing people to listen to something that they resonate with and have a convo about. So I'm grateful to be part of that. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for coming along.
And I think sorry, go on, Rach. Very good topic to talk about. So thank you for bringing it to our attention, because it's something we all, I think, suffer from to some extent.
And I forgot to do the admin at the start and tell Amanda that I was going to stop recording before we boot her out of the Zoom room. So listeners, I'm about to stop recording. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.